Good afternoon. We are so happy to have you join us today for another Tuesdays for Teachers session. I'm Debbie Fawcett, and my colleague Susan is not with me today, but we have a very interesting slate. As you can see, we're going to talk about modeling hybrid learning, core instruction, activities, and games for online classrooms. Next. I do want to welcome you. You know me, I'm usually around for most of them, but we are so pleased today to have Dan Griffith with us from Essential Education. We listened to your comments about what you wanted to hear and know more about. And so although Susan and I can do a very thorough job in keeping you at about a 30,000-foot level with ideas and directions you may want to look for things that happen in your classroom, you were asking for a deeper dive into resources and things you could use. And so our vendor, Dan Griffith, and his team have stepped up to the plate to help us today. Dan, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everybody. Can't wait to talk to you. You're going to hear plenty of me in a few minutes.
All right, good deal. So what we're going to accomplish today is very similar to what we ask anytime we have a special guest to join us. So we are going to talk again about the instructional landscape that you're dealing with, that we are all dealing with from both an education and a testing perspective. We're also going to discuss a partnership to respond to those needs of students and educators that have been identified. That is why we are joined today by Dan Griffith. And we're going to take a deeper dive to model classroom resources. That is not what we do at GED Testing Service, except when we have the opportunity to partner with our vendors. And we want to share some of the outstanding things that we see today with Essential Education. And the last thing, I will come back toward the end and kind of close up how we connect what you learned today about classroom resources to the GED Enhanced Score Report. Next. The instructional landscape, as I've told you before, I think most of you are not seeing any kind of classroom instructional setting like this. You're in a virtual world, which has really changed our mindset and how we think and do things in the classroom. So because of this changed instructional landscape, it has been incumbent upon us at the testing service to look for new and creative ways to deliver the test, which we do through the online proctored GED test. And our vendors and partners have come through with some creative ways. I think we all knew about virtual instruction and we tinkered with it a little bit in our previous lives pre-COVID. But now that it's become the way and the means that we reach out and connect to our students, it is so important that we have these conversations about what's out there available and what else can we use in the classroom to help our students get across the finish line. And so with that said, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend and colleague, Dan Griffith. I've had the privilege of working with Dan through many iterations in our varied careers, whether I was at the State Department of Education in Louisiana or GED Testing Service, and in many positions that he's had. So I'm really happy to introduce Dan to you all today for some exciting and interactive things for your classroom. Dan?
Thank you, Debbie. And thanks everybody for being here today. We're excited to be able to show you a few things. And well, I'll show you a few things from our program. I'm also going to show you a whole bunch of free tools that we've created to really help you with these issues around hybrid learning and online activities and things to make your classrooms really engaging. Debbie didn't mention, but I am a GED graduate myself in 1984 from Pikes Peak Community College after I dropped out of high school at 17. So I have a long and really long storied history with GED Testing Service. We appreciate the opportunity we have to partner with them at Essential Education and try to help you and your students reach their fullest potential. So Today we're going to look at a few things. We're going to do some activities, we're going to look at some tools, we're going to talk about some challenges, and maybe give you some direction for some things that you can do to make your class more engaging, and also take some load off of you as well. So we'll look a little bit about the challenges that we have to face in hybrid learning. We're going to look at some tools around core instruction that can help you alleviate some of those challenges. And then I've got some really cool activities we're going to walk through that you can download and use. And we're going to talk about some games you can use while you're doing hybrid learning as well, that are very simple and easy to implement, and kind of spice up your classroom a little bit. So let's take a minute just to set the stage and establish what some of the challenges are we face in the new environment. One of the ones that we hear at Essential Education on a regular basis is this concept of authoring content. You know, if you're going to bed every night at 2 in the morning because you've spent the last 4 hours making a PowerPoint for the next, day's presentation, that is going to wear you out in no time flat. And so, as educators, we have to find a way to access content without necessarily having to author every piece of content ourselves. And so that's one of the real challenges I think teachers have felt in moving to an online environment. Engaging students is another key aspect. It's difficult to get students' attention sometimes in an online environment or a hybrid environment. If you're alternating, we've seen classes where they might meet on Tuesday and Thursday, but they're all online on Monday and Wednesday. There's kind of a chaotic feel sometimes to that, and it's difficult to keep students focused and engaged in the work they need to do. Tracking progress can be difficult simply because of kind of that chaos of back and forth, where you had a really kind of linear approach. You had students every single day. You could see them. You may not meet with them except every couple of weeks or something in a face-to-face scenario. A lot of it may be done online, etc. So progress tracking is, a real challenge depending on how, focused your system is. I think all teachers kind of lament the connection with students that they've lost. I think a lot about what really makes an adult ed classroom, and you think about the ability to pat somebody literally physically on the back and say, great job, or to listen to conversations that your students are having so that you really understand kind of what their lives are like, and then you can connect to that and you can create relationships with them. And if you're strictly online, that's hard to do. You don't get any of that kind of periphery understanding of what students are doing. And then that leads to the next situation, which is it's difficult to differentiate instruction if you can't really tap into what you know about students. One of the great benefits of developing those relationships with students is that that Mary is really into motorcycles and John is loves woodworking, or whatever the things are, and that helps you to integrate resources and sites and things that you pull up and activities that you do, so that it's really tailored to what those students are excited by. And that can be difficult if your connection to students is strained in the first place. And then fixing technical issues. I am not a technology expert. This little sucker in front of me, I can make it work, but I don't know why, the screen isn't sizing correctly on a student's laptop or, thing when they're sitting at home and I'm sitting in my home. I don't know how to fix those types of things. And yet I think we feel as educators a bit of a responsibility to, but oftentimes we literally lack the understanding and the ability to fix those technical issues. And I think all these things kind of run into challenges for us, like how many times have you had students log in and their mic isn't working or something like that? Well, those things are bumps in the road that really impact the first 5 or 10 minutes of a class setting. And you feel a lot of pressure to get class going, and yet you've got this technical issue or something like that standing in your way. So these challenges are very real. There's a lot of things we can do to mitigate those. And so with these in mind, just kind of as a framework, let's talk about, what we can do to make the most of what we have and be as successful as we can in the environments we have. So when we ask ourselves really what elements of face-to-face instruction translate into this hybrid or online format, I think there's some really good news here. A lot of times when you first kind of just step into it, you think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do all this, right? But the delivery of content is still the delivery of content. So anything that you were doing as direct instruction before should in fact translate at least 90% to what you're doing in a Zoom or online type format. You still need to create opportunities for students to interact with content. You still need to push content, you might say, to them, understanding to them, and there's plenty of ways to do that with video and different types of presentations that are available out there. So this delivery of content doesn't really change dramatically. We need to remember that and take heart to that. The media that's moving it is a little different because I'm not face-to-face with students, but the actual action of delivering the content is still very similar. Secondly, the controlled activities. So things that you did in your classroom where you had a lot of control in the activity. You had a very clear set of directions that you move students through series of steps. Those should translate very closely, regardless of whether it's an online format or a face-to-face format. And so many of those things carry through for us. You can still have rich conversations, and in some ways you can have better conversations, but you have to kind of tap into that previous bullet about controlling it. One of the things I find really hard about an online classroom is there's only one speaker at a time, right? And we know that when you're in a classroom setting, conversations can happen and people talk over each other a little bit, which you don't really want, but yet it's part of the natural ebb and flow of conversation. And multiple people getting involved in something, and it kind of lets you know when somebody has something to say, and then they can come into the conversation. There's a very natural rhythm of conversation that happens when we're live with people, but when we're doing it through a format like Zoom or WebEx or something like that, boy, there's only one person that's going to be speaking at any one time. So you as an educator have to control that in order to guide those conversations. But you can do it. You can say, Allie, can you tell me what your thoughts are on this? And as Allie speaks, then you can say, Tamara, what do you think? Do you agree with that? Is that something that you're in alignment with, or do you need to add something to her thought? And as you orchestrate that, the conversations can be very rich and engaging for people. But you can't just kind of leave it where you ask a question and then wait for somebody to respond, because people get very nervous about coming off mute, or they don't want to step on each other, and then two people almost always invariably start talking at the same time, and then you have to so it's much cleaner if you're orchestrating it, and then you can evaluate, or then you can build these rich conversations. And the other thing that works really well, I think, and translates well, are small group kind of pairing things. So, Zoom has the breakout feature. There are other ways that you can have students work together in small groups. Even if you're just pairing students, like right now, if you were chatting with somebody on here, you can do a private chat if your settings are set up that way. And you can go in and send a specific chat to a specific student. And so I'll often have two people, and I'll show you in just a minute, I'll set up a pairing guide, and it'll say, Bob, you're going to talk to Mike. And so Bob and Mike will private chat each other, whatever the conversation is. So the whole group doesn't have to see it. They're just having a conversation. It lets them work out their thoughts, and then I can pass that through into my instructional activities. So those elements, I think, translate pretty well. One of the things that we really need to figure out, though, is, how can I use core instructional tools to take some of the load off of you in some of these other categories? So we talked about like authoring content. That's a lot of effort to author content. We talked about diagnostic reports. Having the ability to track student progress is really important, and there are programs and tools that are available for you to make the most of. And connecting to students. Messaging systems of a variety of types exist that allow you to work closely and build connections with students. So I want to jump over for just a minute and go live into our program. And regardless of what program excuse me, you're using, I believe many of the programs have similar types of tools available. In our GED Academy program, we have a tab for teachers called Content Maps. On that tab, I can view the correlations for any of the GED assessment targets. So I can come in and look at the reading targets, see that report. I can find any of the content that I want by standard. So if you know specifically a standard that you want to teach, you have all that there. We have correlations to our workbooks. I assume other publishers have similar types of correlations available. One of my favorite things that we do is provide you with the full scope and sequence. So if I come into the RLA reading tools and see report, I can see exactly where the program starts. In our pre-GED level, we started intermediate vocabulary as the first unit. There's a test out quiz, and then there's 7 or 8 lessons here that start with intermediate vocabulary workplace connections. We talk about opinions and reasons, choosing precise language, and then there's a quiz at the end. But I can go through each of these units and kind of see how they're structured. Now, if I'm looking for structure in my classroom, a core instructional pathway for students, this scope and sequence of our program has been mapped out by our educational design team to create a pathway that makes sense, that builds from unit to unit for students and builds the content. So I can scroll through here as an educator and I can say, wow, these are units that I could build on as well. The second thing that's useful here is I can come into a particular lesson. So if we go to the inferences unit, for example, we know that this is an important aspect of teaching. And so I can go into our lesson on evidence for inferences, and this will pop up on the screen. I don't think the audio transfers in WebEx, so you probably won't be able to hear what they're saying there. But this lesson, I can actually play the lesson and use this as my kind of PowerPoint, you might say, as the core instruction with my students. So if I had you as a group of students right now, we could go in and we could work through this lesson. I could advance it to different points in the lesson. We could talk about why evidence for inferences is important. I personally love this lesson because, when you think about core human skills, this is one of the most important things we learn. I've listened to my sons argue for hours over who was better, Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. And they are essentially tapping into their ability to provide evidence for their inference that their choice is correct. And whether it be a political debate, a religious debate, a sports debate, a food debate, whatever your thing is, your ability to cite good evidence is your ability to sway conversations and show that you're right. And so we start really at that point in this lesson. Our character here, Curtis, is going to talk about a very real life example about one of the kids in his neighborhood who had cancer. The parents from that child were over at his house and they got into an argument the dad had thought they needed to go to a different doctor and his mom thought it wasn't true. And so this lesson then takes that concept, that real life situation, contextualized for things that is meaningful to adults, and uses that to then the student will read through some pamphlets, they'll have to make some decisions, they'll have to show evidence for their inferences. And we know that that skill is directly tied to GED success, because a student who can do that can do well on the comparative essay, where they're going to need to read 2 pieces of content and compare them and analyze them. We know that this skill is important, not just on GED, but truly in life. This is a fundamental skill. And so having an access to something like this that you can play and stop and talk about is a great way to engage students in learning, and have a core instructional tool that takes some of the pressure off of you. Let's see, is there any way I'm going to be able to get out of it? There we go. Okay. Just one last thing is looking at reports. We talked a little bit about diagnostic information. And so one of the reports that we use in our program is called our Skill Mastery Report. And if I look at our GED class and we look at Curtis, and let's look at some math skills. You'll see that the report pulls up each of the GED assessment targets. And then based on those, I can drill in. Let's see, wait a minute, I grabbed the wrong student. Let me grab a different student here. Where is, let's see if I have any data in here. No, well, so you can pull up these reports. You can look through each of the objectives, and then each of the sub-skills is also outlined here. So I can see exactly what skills on the GED targets the student's having trouble with, but then our team also broke those down into sub-skills. So if this student had data in it, it would show either not started, not ready, almost ready, or ready. And so I could see exactly what things I need to focus on. That's a great way to use a program for some assessment and diagnostic tracking. All right, let me see here. Where do I have to go from here? Let me go back here for just a minute to this. So having tools like that, messaging systems, our system has a messaging system built into it. You can use things like WhatsApp and other tools like that, GroupMe, to create text messaging systems and create that sense of community in your classroom. All of those are really important to provide that core instruction for students. Now, the question is, how do you get students started effectively in this? And I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about this, because one of the things that we've noticed in this transition from, kind of live to online is that too often we're putting students into programs, education, software programs or something like that, and the student doesn't really get the full experience out of the door. And we need to make sure that we do some things to help them effectively get used to being educated in this format. And so one is spend some time in an introductory lesson. Take the time to show your whole class. Say you had 20 students and you just started them in a software program. Don't just set up their accounts and let them go, but set up their accounts and then do a lesson, like an actual lesson with an assessment at the end and activities built into it, to make sure that students understand how to use that software effectively. What we've seen is a huge difference in programs where they just kind of turn students loose, and you'll see the attrition rate is very high. Students they start out and then they just taper off really quickly. We want to make sure that they start off strong and continue strong. Do some guided learning where you're actually doing a lesson or an activity. Regardless of the software program you have, set yourself up as a mock student. So on that first day when you're turning students loose, open up your mock student account and pretend like you're a student and walk through it and let them see you do it. Let them see a guided example of what it looks like. And then scaffold their release. Give them tools, give them support, Make sure that you're asking them to start small and kind of move through the process until they really become independent learners on their own. Now, let me switch back for just a minute because I want to show you a great piece that we created. So we just launched this teacher toolkit just recently. And so in here, we have all kinds of different tools for you. This is a whole workshop we did on engaging students in hybrid learning. We have an actual teacher from Austin Community College who does a webinar on, how she's doing hybrid learning. We have a webinar we did on lesson planning to make that easy for you. We've got different webinars on hybrid classroom. We're going to come into these activity templates in just a minute. We've also got some tips for you on communication tools down here. So if you're not really sure about some of the different things that are out there, like Facebook Meet and Zoom and Google Meet and all those, there are charts in here that help you decide what you might want to use. We also looked at some learning management systems that you can explore. So if you're wondering about how Moodle works versus Canvas versus something like that, there's some tools in here to help you make assessments around that. And then we have some pieces down here to help students if they're using our program on computers or on mobile devices. And finally down here, there is a whole PDF here on how to introduce the program to your students. It's a full learning plan, 6-page PDF lesson plan that walks you through every step of getting students started in our program. And I would encourage you to look, if you're not using our program, of course, we'd love to have you come contact us and get some information about that. But if you're using another educational program, you might still want to look at this lesson plan because it really scopes out how you get a student started in a software program. And you could, adjust it for whatever program you're using. These are all free, and we've got some links into it you're going to see here in just a minute, but I wanted to point it out because that kind of scaffolding information that we're talking about here and learning plan information is really important that you take the time to get students started in that way. All right, let's talk a little bit about activities, and then we're going to go in and show you a couple things that were in that activity guide I just mentioned. There are really 3 elements of a good online activity. The first is that your assignments have to be really clear. If you are, if you're trying to deliver an activity through the, whatever your program is here, Zoom or WebEx or whatever, you have to make sure you've really mapped it out clearly for students. They understand the instructions, even more so than when you're face-to-face, because when you're in a face-to-face classroom, if a student is kind of a little bit lost, they kind of just scooch a little closer to the student next to them, right? And they kind of, what did she say? How am I supposed to do that? What's the next step? They can do that. They can kind of coattail their way through an activity. But in an online format, you can't really ride the coattails. You're there kind of isolated and you're in this kind of bubble to yourself. So your assignments have to be crystal clear and make sure that they're mapped out in a way that students really understand them. So it requires you to do a little more upfront planning to make sure that you're communicating things in a way that really helps students. The second part is you need a tracking mechanism. And by that, I don't mean an assessment. We're going to see that next. I just put that up. The difference here is a tracking mechanism are ways for you to ensure that students are engaging in the activity, that they're actually with you, that they're doing something. Because they're not just directly in front of you, it can be really difficult in certain types of activities if you don't have a tracking mechanism that's going through it so you can see what they're building, what they're thinking, what their process is. And then finally, you need an assessment tool to make sure, obviously, that they understand what you're imparting to them. So let me switch back over here. I'm getting good at this switching.
Hi, Dan. Could you listen to a question while you're switching back over?
Absolutely, go for it.
Great. One of our attendees wants to know if this is set up to interact with the Canvas platform.
If you're talking about our program, the GED Academy program, we can do single sign-on with Canvas, which allows you to do, when a student logs into Canvas, they're automatically logged into our program. So then there's just a button on Canvas that they would press, that would take them directly into our program. Now, there are programs that want to know, or that want to like cut our program apart and put different pieces in there. And that is not set up, because you need what's called SCORM files for that, and that's not the way our program is. Plus, you would eliminate all the adaptive learning pieces that we built in that actually monitor how a student is working through the program. So, but we can do single sign-on with Canvas, and we have a number of users that have done that. If anybody wants information on that, they can certainly let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I breezed through in the teacher toolkit this hybrid activities template. And I think if I do, let's see, can I get rid of that? I may not be able to get rid of it right this second. So let me just scroll through this. So if I zoom out just a little bit here, there we go. So this is a PDF that we put together with 6 templates for you. And the idea here was to give you some activities that would be easily integrated into your classroom. So we created 6 different activities: a think, chat, share, like a think, pair, share, a KWL, a compare and contrast, an online timeline, Frayer vocabulary connections, and a collaborative summary. And in this document, we actually tell you, so for think, chat, share, why you might want to use this and when you might want to use it. This would be great if you're trying to find evidence to determine something's true or false, or if you want to solve a problem or a riddle or a puzzle related to learning. And then we created lesson plan templates. So if you print this out, you're going to get a blank document for all of your lesson plan except the activity area down here. So you could put in your lesson plan and the date and your objectives and your anticipatory set or your sponge activity that you want to start with. You can put in what you're going to do for instruction. But when you get down here to the activity, you'll see that we've mapped that out for you. So you need to put in a question here, and then you're going to have students think about this question. And then you're going to have them chat, use the private chat feature in your online program to communicate individually with one other student. The student should discuss the question and be prepared to share their thoughts with the class. Bring the group together to list key points from the chat time, and to extend learning, break students up into pairs or have them work independently to prioritize the key points that you come up with as a class from most to least relevant or important to the question. So then the rest of the learning plan or lesson plan would include guided practice, independent practice, reflection, assessment. You fill all that out. So whether you're a math teacher or a language teacher or a social studies teacher, you can download this activity template and use this to map out a learning plan, a lesson plan for yourself. Then we give you some tools for students. So remember I said you need a tracking mechanism. You need something to make sure students work with that. So you can use this PDF or create your own, whichever you'd like, that you give to students. And so they put the question at the top. I give them some time. What do I think? So the first thing I do is give them a little time to think about it. Then I get them chatting with their partner. What does my partner think? What are the bullets I might want to write down, or the thoughts that my partner's having on this? And then what do we decide is the answer, the most important things to this question? So the student has a mechanism to engage with this question. And then we give you an assessment tool as well. So now I can put my student names down here in the class, and I can score them on this checklist rubric. Did they participate? What do I give them for speaking or listening or reasoning? And so I can use this as an assessment tool to monitor the activity that students are doing and make sure that I'm getting the most out of it with students. So hopefully that makes sense. For each of the 6 activities that we defined. Oh, and then here's part 2, which is the extension, where they would write up what the key points are for the class, and then they would organize or order those in terms of importance.
Dan, would you like a couple of more questions?
Sure, glad we're getting questions.
Yeah, I thought so. Speaking to this, and then I'm going to go back. Well, let me just go back. I had another person ask, would your program work with Schoolology? While we're looking at platforms, so.
I'm not positive. We'd have to check. I mean, again, we can do single sign-on with most anything. And so I'd be glad to check into any of that. If you want to know more information about it, just email me, dan@essentialed.com.
Correct. And one of our participants sort of missed where these plans are located in the program, and I'm going to read the other one to you also because they kind of tie together. One was asking, where are these plans located in the program? And the other is, will these be available for participants to download? And the comment was, it's a great idea to keep us from not being up till 2 a.m. working on a lesson. So, so I thought I'd let you take both of those in kind of a lump there.
I appreciate it. So if you look in your handout section of the WebEx, you're going to see that there's a link to the PDF of this whole deck, and there's a flyer that we've also put in there. These handouts are free to all teachers, so it's not actually part of our instructional program. These are part of the resources we make available to educators on our essentialed.com site. It's called the Teacher Toolkit. I believe the flyer that we put in there shows that, and I'll go back to it in just a minute and show you where you can find those. But these are absolutely available to you. We hope that you can make use of them, and we'll make sure that you have the link here in just a minute so that you can get that.
And Dan, I did a snippet and put each of those portions of the flyer on a slide in the closeout too. So they'll have multiple ways to see it.
Yep. And you can always just go to essentialed.com too. I mean, you can find it on there pretty easily if you remember the thing called the Teacher Toolkit. So I'm not going to go through all of these for the sake of time. KWL would work the same way. Again, I'm just going to scroll through here. So you'd see you have your lesson plan all set up, the activity we filled out, and we map you through how to work that. We give you the tracking document for students so that they have something to do. We give you an assessment piece so that you can assess what they're doing. And we give you an extension activity that can be done with KWL. Same thing with compare and contrast. I just wanted to show you this one timeline. So there's a graphic organizer. There's an extension activity. Here we go, the online timeline. So I like this one a lot because it really encourages deep learning, and it does allow you to do something that kind of gets your whole class involved in something. So I'll just zoom in for a minute here. You'll see that I'm going to give each student a blank timeline, or I'm going to create it on my screen as well. And then I'm going to break students up into one group for each section of the timeline. And I'm going to have the groups use either a room feature or a private chat to identify the important elements of their section of the timeline. And then I'm going to bring everybody back to report. And so you'll see down here, like an example would be, this is my timeline. At the top here, I might put, let's take for an example, Beauty and the Beast. So let's say I wanted everybody to think about Beauty and the Beast. And so one group, I'm going to give a section here at the beginning that focuses on the introduction, the beginning, the setting. So their job is to think about how the beginning of it sets up. What information is imparted in the beginning? What background information? Where is it set? What's the beginning of the story like? And then I'm going to give a second group, I'm going to have them look at the part where Belle is brought to meet the Beast. How does that happen? What are the important activities that go on in that, in that part of it? And then I'm going to have another group just look at, or talk about what happens in kind of the uneasy start, when she's in the castle and And now what's going to happen? What are those things where she gets mad at him and she goes off and looks into the, corners of the room she's not supposed to be? What are those key events? And then I'm going to have another group do the section where they kind of grow together. I'm going to have another group do the section where Gaston creates all this conflict. And then the section that, a group that does the happy ending and the resolution. And so if I separate it like that and I give them clear instructions about what part they have to do, then each student needs a section. My section of the timeline is this. It belongs at this point in the overall timeline. I'm the 4th section after blah, blah, blah. And then what are the important details about this? So the student fills that in. They can work in pairs to think about that. And then I'm going to bring them all back together and have them report. And so group 1 reports, and each student can now use this timeline to write down what the other students say about all the other sections. So at the end, everybody has all the information, but each student only did one of the sections themselves. Now, there's lots of different ways to modify this and use different programs or Google Docs or things like that. This is to get you started, to give you a way to think about how you might do it. But I love this activity because it's a great way to do something that I would actually do in class if I had people face to face, but now in a hybrid setting, I can also do it because now I've got a way to think about it and a way to implement this and make my classroom a more engaging place. All right, let's see. Do that and that. Let me, so this guide again, and let me switch over here, is available in our teacher toolkit. And you can find that on our essentialed.com site, and I'm going to show you the address to get there in just a minute. So you'll be able to write that there as well. All right, now let me switch back over to my.
And when you switch back over, Dan, let's go over a couple of more questions.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Do you have an Essential Ed in an application yet?
No, the program is too big to apply that way. So you can't just go to an app to do it because there's too many lessons. So we have to basically you have to have it in a format where it's being delivered through the computer. Now we have partnered with some people that allow us to serve the link to the program through an app. And so I can get you some details on that if you'd like.
Okay. Another question. Some folks are looking in the handouts as we directed them to. This attendee is just stating that the lesson plan is not included in the handout, and she's just wondering if it is available on the website. Is that where you're directing them on these links?
Correct, yeah. You should see in the handout how to get to it.
Yes, okay. And one last question. When you were talking about the reports that were available, an attendee wrote in, are the reports also available for TABE?
Yes, yeah, our TABE Academy program links to it as well, and you can get all of that information as well.
Okay, then we are up to date with the questions.
All right, so now the question is, how do I get out of this and back to what I was trying to do? Which is proving really difficult, Debbie. Let's see, window maybe. Maybe it's the wrong one.
That's okay. Now you know why I have Susan Pittman do all of that. So
right? Literally, I'm hitting escape and cannot get out of this document. Alt tab. What we'll do is this, and we'll go over here. And I can't even minimize it right now. Window.
let's see.
1 second and I'll figure this out.
Oh, we're fine. We're very used to this.
All right. Can I get out of that? Close current tab. All right.
There you go.
Okay. Phew. There's the link. So on you should be able to see now the link. If you go to so https://go.essentialed.com/educators/get-toolkit. And I don't know if I can highlight it. I don't think I can, but let me just type it real quick into the message bar, into the chat. go.essentialed.com/educators/get-toolkit. Enter. There we go. I just put it into everybody in the chat window, so hopefully that will get you there if you just want to link off of that. All right, so the last thing we want to talk about briefly is some games. And you know, I think games are really important. It's important for people to have a break at times when you're you know, working with students, when you're in these environments. You know, we all know we've been on long Zoom calls. You're all probably getting a little tired of my voice at this point. So having something that you can do that, you know, breaks it up and adds a little fun to it is important. And so there's really three kind of games that I want you to think about. The first are just quick games. I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do, pull out of your pocket at any time you want and have a little fun with it. The second are planned games. These are things that are going to take a little bit of work on your part. You need to prepare for them. You need to have some tools in place, some things set up for you to be able to do them. And then the third, we're just going to touch on briefly, are creating systems that really draw on gamification. And this really, that's like a whole giant webinar different, because to set up those types of systems takes quite a bit of thought and background. But you can tap into many of the tools that video game designers use to keep people addicted to their games right in your classroom, if you give it enough thought and if your school or your program is willing to put some time into that. So let's talk about a couple of fun games that we can do. So I happen to teach on Mondays and Thursdays an early morning seminary class to 13 to 17-year-olds at 6 a.m. in the morning. They actually come 5 days a week, and I teach 2 days and another guy teaches 3 days. And I don't care what you're dealing with, it's not as hard as what I have to deal with. If you want to try to get 20 13 to 17-year-olds excited about reading scriptures at 6 o'clock in the morning, I guarantee you it's a rough go. So I had to come up with some things that we could do that would be fun. So some of them are things like description drawings. Sometimes I'll sketch something out and then I describe it and they try to draw it. And we're going to do one here in just a minute for fun with you, because it only takes a second. Some of you may have heard the game Would You Rather? And I love the Would You Rather with a Y on the end, because you can do that just about any time. You know, would you rather have fought in World War I or World War II, and why? Would you rather, I don't know, if you're teaching something in biology, would you rather eat a grub or a butterfly? Why? You can do all kinds of things like that that just are fun. They just break things up. It gives you a chance to laugh a little bit with students, to get their mind kind of moving in a different direction, open it up, and they're simple and fast, and you can do them just about any time you want. And then I got 3 games for you that I want you to consider. One is Battleship. The second one is like a word search sponge activity, something that you can do right up front. And then the third one is Hollywood Squares. If you're old enough to remember that, like I am, Hollywood Squares can be a lot of fun. So let's have a little fun first and just do a quick drawing. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you, just pull it out, and I'm going to try to describe a picture to you, simple picture, and you try to draw it, and let's see how close you get. This is a great activity, again, just to break things up, and it also is really good for using descriptive language, right? And making sure that you understand what people are saying. It's good speaking and listening as well. All right, so, and just keep this small. This doesn't have to be any bigger than about 3 inches by 3 inches. Kind of in a vertical line, I want you to draw 6 small circles all touching each other. So the first one you draw, then below it, draw a second one where they touch at the very bottom. Below that, a third one that touches the bottom of the second one. Below that, a fourth one that touches the bottom of the third one, on down, so that you have 6 small circles in a vertical line. Now comes the tricky part. So on the third circle, angling upwards and to the right, I want you to draw a fairly large oval so that it's about from the third circle up to the first circle at like a 45-degree angle, going to the right. And then I want you to do the same thing on the left-hand side, a large oval starting at the third circle, going upwards at a 45-degree angle to the left. Then, starting at the fourth circle, I want you to draw another oval, same size as the other 2 you've drawn, but this time going downwards at a 45-degree angle with the top of it touching the bottom of the one that you drew before. Oh, there's going to be some wild drawings out of this. And then same thing on the left-hand side of the fourth circle, a large oval going downwards at 45-degree angle, starting so that the top of it is touching the bottom of the left-hand oval that you've already drawn, going down at a 45-degree angle. Then at the very top, I want you to draw a kind of crescent moon coming out of the top circle and curving to the right. Not very big, about the size of one of the circles, you know, about the size of the half of the circle. And then I want you to do the same thing on the left-hand side of the top of the circle, curving out to the left. And then at the end of those, put 2 small circles, really small, just not very big circles. All right, let's see now. If you were good, or if I was good, I guess it's as much about whether or not I gave good directions. Your picture should look something like that, except I didn't put the square at the top. So you've got 6 circles, you've got a large oval going at a 45-degree angle to the right, a large oval at 45-degree angle at the left, same thing on the other side, and then these 2 kind of crescent moon lines out with circles on the end of it. You can put in the chat box whether or not you were anywhere close or not. It would be really interesting to hear. But you can see there's lots of activities like this. You can draw all kinds of things, like how would you describe this drawing, you know, or other drawings. You can come up with all kinds of things. It's great for a math class to do some things. You can do, you know, geometric shapes linked together. They have to use terms like circle and square and rectangle and isosceles.
You've got some great comments, Dan. Some of them nailed it and others close, but actually drew crescent moons. Some of us are having some difficulty with our 45-degree angles, and 90% correct. And in closing, I'll tell you, I'm from Louisiana, and so probably came out closer to a crawfish than a butterfly, but not a problem. So.
That's right. I love doing them, and we did this as a sales team, and then everybody had to hold their picture up to the camera. And then we had a little, you know, little prize for whoever was closest. So, you know, again, this is a quick way to do an activity. You can have students come up with the picture. You can have students draw the picture, or I mean, write out their directions first and submit those. And then you can draw the pictures, and then you can go back and revise the directions as a group in class. it's a great opportunity to do some revision activities and things like that with students. All right, let me just jump over, because I told you I'd talk a little bit about some of these other tools that we've done. Debbie, are you still seeing my screen? Did you see me switch to a spreadsheet?
Yes, I did. I see you in the chat pairings with students' names in 2 columns.
Okay. So this is something that I do with this class, is I set up chat pairings. So if I wanted to use private chat and have them talk together, I just jump on here, and now Allie has to talk to Michaela. And so it shows them, I can put this on my screen, and now they know who they have to pair up with. I change this on a regular basis. So it just mixes things up. And it gives me those pairings. So having this is a really nice tool when I want to do something where I want to put students together to talk about something. I created a simple battleship grid. So we all remember probably how to play Battleship. And so I tell the students, we're going to play Battleship today. If you sink one of my battleships, I'll give you 5 minutes. I'll end class 5 minutes early. If you sink 2, I'll end class 10 minutes early. And so as I ask questions, if they participate and answer a question, I let them give me a coordinate. So Josie would give me E2, and I would come in here and I would say, nope, no hit. You know, now I don't show them this, so I'm not sharing my screen, obviously, or else that would be way too easy. So I'm not sharing my screen, but they all know they have to go between A and J and 1 through 10. And every time I do the class, I just come in here and I change the highlight, you know, anytime I want to do this. So if I don't want that one, so maybe I move my battleship up here the next time I'm doing it, and I just highlight it like that. So now I know where my battleships are. And every time a student gives me one, if they, you know, if they get a hit, I put their initials in so I can remember who has answered questions and who hasn't. It helps me call on different people, and I just keep track of them. And if they sink a battleship, I got to end class 5 minutes early. It's a really quick way to do a game. You'd be amazed at how engaged they get with it, trying to figure it out. You'll see them in chat saying, you know, try this, try that. We should be going here. We should be going there. And, you know, what does it hurt me to end class 5 minutes early if I've got a really strong engagement from students, you know, in the whole process? Or you can find other rewards for them as well. I often do word search sponges with them. And so this is an opening activity. I'll put this up. Now I've highlighted the words here, but I would not do that. And the way I create these is I just delete all of these. I write in the words I want first, and then I just randomly go through and you know, click letters to fill it out. It takes about 4 minutes to do a whole word search thing. There are also sites out there that will let you create a word search very easily. I just do it this way. I will tell you though, there is one downside, which is you can accidentally, you know, create words that you don't really want to create in here, you know, so you got to be a little careful about that. And I know I'm going to get, you know, dogged by it at some point, but I keep throwing the dart and praying that I'm not going to create any word that's, you know, horrific in here. So it is one way to do it. Probably with adult students, it's less worrisome, you know, just by nature, but I'm just giving you that as a caveat that you need to be thoughtful about it. And then I love Hollywood Squares is a fun one too, where I tell them you got to get 4 in a row. And so I just put this up. I assign each student to a square. So when I call on them, if Lydia gives me a correct answer, then I put an O in the box. And if she gets to choose the next person to give an answer at that point. So let's say Lydia chooses Josie and Josie gets it wrong. I put an X in that box, and they got to get 4 O's in a row. And so now Josie gets to choose. Oh, and the other thing I do is if they get it wrong, the teacher gets to pick the next student. So from here, I might come down here to Hayden and have Hayden give an answer. And if he gets it right, then he gets to pick the next person. And he might want to pick, you know, Kyle to give the answer or Preston to give the answer in an attempt. So it makes it a little fun, and I get to throw them off course every once in a while if they're not getting a correct answer. Now, things like the Battleship and Hollywood Squares require that you have a good set of questions prepared. Because if you don't, you're going to run out of questions real quickly, and you don't want to be making them up on the fly. So you need to come up with a good, bank of questions ahead of time so that you can ask them fluidly, and students don't see you kind of grappling, for questions. But that's really the key aspect of the preparation. It only takes 10 or 15 minutes to put together a set of questions around something that you want to teach. So I hope those ideas would be meaningful to you. I don't have these prepared anywhere. I mean, this is simply just a spreadsheet that I created really quickly. It's super easy to do, and so hopefully, if you need a little help thinking through this, you can come back and access this recording once GED posts it up on their website, and you'll be able to come back to this section and say, how do you do that again? And you'll be able to see this spreadsheet or whatever, so that you'll remember how to put those games together. Okay.
Well, those are good things to answer, Dan, because somebody wanted to know, where can I find games and activities? So you just answered where you find these again by looking at our recording.
Yep. Okay. And we also did a whole Tuesdays with Essential Ed. So we have every other month, we do a free webinar series. You'll see down at the bottom of this slide, go.essentialed.com, and then educators, and then tweed-subscribe, which is Tuesdays with Essential Ed, and then /subscribe will get you to our site so that you can get on our list to be invited to those meetings as well. And let me just type that in real quick. Essential There you go. And you can get to that one as well. I just put it in the chat box. All right. So just two other things to remind you of. This toolkit that we just launched is free to all teachers. There's all kinds of great tools in there for you. And we also, at the beginning of I guess it was right around the end of March, we launched a distance learning series that we did. There are 6 webinars on there that show you how to engage in pure distance learning with students. It talks about different tools you can use, some of the soft skills as an educator you might want to think about for distance learning. There's some great courses. We have 2 live or actual teachers who recorded webinars for us on using software programs and distance learning and how they use it. They're unscripted, so they're actual teacher views of how they're using programs in distance learning. So I would encourage you to go there as well. And all of this you can find on our essentialed.com site. So we feel like hybrid learning happens most effectively when the elements of core instruction, activities, and games are well planned and executed. And so we've done as much as we can to try to provide you with tools that are available to help you do that. We'd love to hear any feedback you have. And if you'd be interested in seeing demos or additional information about our GED Academy program, we have a shared license that also lets you access TABE Academy with that as well. So if you have students who are, one of the things people love is if, they might be ready for GED level work in reading and social studies and science, but maybe they're at a 3rd or 4th grade in math, and you want to start them at a lower level, you can start them in TABE Academy, and it still just counts as 1 seat for us. I'd love to get you set up with demos of that, and you can always just email me at dan@essentialed.com. I guess in closing, I would just like to thank you personally for the work you've done on behalf of your students and people all across this country. We cannot move forward without adults who are undereducated becoming educated and getting good jobs. And it's such a critical thing. When you help them accomplish that, you create a legacy of learning that impacts families and communities, and in the end, our country. And I'm grateful to be partnered with you in the work that you do. You're amazing, And our company is just stands in awe of your efforts day in and day out, especially through things like coronavirus. So Debbie, I will go back to your slides then, and you
All right.
from there.
Okay.
There we go.
And Dan, thank you so much. What I want to do is tie in the information and the resources that you have seen now. And if you happen to be using these resources, the next step for your students in the classroom is once they take the GED Ready the GED Ready test or the operational test, is making sure we remember to utilize the SCORE report for student success. And I've shared this many times, but I want to make sure you understand the work we've done into the SCORE report so that it's more user-friendly based on input from educators and from students. And here's just an example. We realized students did not always know what book they were using, but they recognize the visual of the book or the software they're using. So we've made it easier when they look at their SCORE report and they tell us what program they're using. We now show it in pop-up instead of a written list going down. So that's the first thing they'll see. Next, we've also improved the skills checklist. We think we've made it a little more clearer, a little more definite, and we've given direction to where you want to go right up in the front of each one of the skills that are needed to be improved. So that is a change that we want everyone to be aware of. Next. And for you educators who told us, my heavens, we print out a mountain of paper and we have nowhere to write, we have included, and you don't see this unless you put it to print, and then these note bars on the side will become available so that not only can the students see what we found in the test with GED Testing Service, but as you discuss it with them, you can put your personal notes in there. So that's what we're looking at to improve the notes. Next. And everything I just showed you, we always ask that you take an opportunity to sign up to receive our in-session educator newsletter. And everything I just showed you, I learned from in-session, not that they didn't tell me as an employee of the testing service, but this came out about a month and a half ago. So everything that was there, if you want the latest and greatest information, you get the in-session newsletter. That's how you get invited to Tuesdays for Teachers and so forth. Next. And as always, I don't care how many times I stand before an audience, I'm always amazed. And sometimes it's new educators that just haven't played at the website a little bit. But most of you on this call surely know that if it's just you for free, click on Educators and Administrators and work your way through the website. I've had educators say, but after I logged in, I could not go, etc. We all understand that login and sign up is for the student portal. We certainly want you to have your own account in the student portal, but please be kind enough to put teacher or administrator as a first or last name, and we'll know you are surfing to see the information that your students are seeing and accessing. And we do think that's important. Next. In the line of professional development, I will tell you that this has been a year and we have tried to mold with the changes. Normally we do Tuesdays for Teachers 6 times a year, but as our chances for face-to-face with you got less and less, we decided it was more important to do sessions such as the one we've done today to bring more content and more variety and more lessons. So you will note that we've had quite a number of sessions from September to this point. And I want to make sure that you all know that our last 2020 Tuesdays for Teachers will be on Tuesday, December 8th, and you'll be receiving information on that shortly. But always know we are available for you for professional development. You know we do Tuesdays for Teachers. I'm not sure local programs are aware. Look to the column to the right. We need to think small and call on me or other members of our staff. You all have new educators on board. You have staff meetings. Put together a list of questions, maybe once or twice a year. Invite us to 30 minutes of a staff meeting just to ask questions about any of the things in the bullet points I listed there. I think sometimes you get so ingrained into thinking that professional development is this big hoo-ha that you only do at a national conference or a state conference, but we actually know what truly works for you are those small connected groups of classroom learning among the staff. And we'd like to be a part of that to answer questions. We are not trying to do it all for you, but it's amazing the kind of questions that teachers have that sometimes they think they shouldn't ask. And it's basic things, because you cannot be responsible for keeping up with everything on every topic, especially not in these times with virtual learning. Also, make sure whether you're new or established in adult ed, never forget the teaching resources, especially the skills needed to pass. Our performance level descriptors are there for you when you want to know the stuff to teach. That's what it is. Next. Dan, I wanted to make sure that we had this in addition to in the flyer that they can download. I wanted just, if you have anything you'd like to say on this or the next slide, please feel free. If not, we'll just let them view them.
Yeah, no, just please visit them. I mean, we hope that there are tools here that you can use and benefit from. And certainly if you have feedback for us, you can always reach me at dan@essentialed.com. And let us know what we can do to help you out more fully.
And next, I think we don't need the Q&A slide because I think we've answered them all. If there's any we've left undone, my apologies in reading and listening, but you can find either me or Dan. Next slide. I think I put our emails in there. Yeah.
Yep.
And so remember, for those of you that want a certificate for attending PD, the certificate will be posted on our website for you to download under our Tuesdays for Teachers tab at GED.com. Give us about 48 hours to get everything posted, but that's where you'll find the recorded webinar, the PDF for the PowerPoint, the flyer from Essential Education, and the deck that I had, just a handful of slides. So with that, unless you have seen any additional questions that came up or anything in chat, I'm gonna let you say your goodbyes and I'll say our goodbyes for the testing service, and we might actually give some people 15 extra minutes in their afternoon.
I think we are, which is like makes us rock stars in the webinar world. So that's all I got.
Okay, Dan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure working with all of you today. We hope to hear and see from you all again on December 8th. Thank you for your time. And Dan, thank you so much for sharing this with us all. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Debbie.